What's it like when all the girls around you are yandere? I discovered my wife is a yandere, but not for me because besides being yandere, she's also into women. Every day she plans in her little notebook how to imprison her beloved goddess in the basement. I plagiarize her plans, making improvements, intending to use them on my own beloved. But one day she got hold of my improved version. I forced an awkward smile. Before I could make excuses, her slender finger landed on one of my improvements. She said, "Nice modifications. Let's try them on you first." I cross my arms as I walk around the basement. There are twice as many items as when I was here 2 weeks ago. Besides handcuffs, shackles, ropes, and blindfolds, there are several sets of unspeakable implements. Seriously, is this a torture chamber? My gaze shifts and freezes. Wasn't there only one whip on the wall before? Why are there 3 now? I take a deep breath as my eyes fix on an enormous object, a newly appeared massive golden cage, keeping her beloved here, treating her as a possession, enjoying her helplessness and dependence. Victoria really knows how to play. I stare at it for a while, step forward, tap it, squeeze it. I practically want to bite it. Surely it can't be solid gold? Miss Victoria is wealthy, but she couldn't be this extravagant, right? Is this the extent of her obsession with her beloved? The notebook she always carries in her purse was left in the basement this time. She probably wrote her evil little plans while looking at all these new implements. Seething, I sit down and open the notebook. Her imprisonment plan has grown by 5 pages. Clearly, she's been increasingly longing for her goddess lately. It reads, "I want to lock her up and make her beg. Calling me queen, that would be perfect. Should have caged her long ago, then she wouldn't run around. Something should be stuffed in her mouth so she won't say things she shouldn't." Controlling my turbulent emotions, I turn page after page. Holy shit, it gets more and more explicit. I stare as I catch up on her imprisonment plans. Her torture methods are getting more intense and twisted. Isn't she afraid of breaking her goddess? So ruthless. If it were my beloved. I think it could be even more twisted. I pull out my notebook and pen, making annotations to improve her plans. For instance, some places allow too much rest time. I think no rest is needed. That's how you truly crush someone's will and resistance. I look up at the implements on the wall, noting down several I like for future purchase. As for those unspeakable tools, I wonder if they come in larger sizes. I get so excited I don't hear the villa's front door open. While making notes and thinking, I reflect how I initially agreed to our marriage of convenience because Victoria was into women. Who knew this lesbian yandere, appearing like an innocent flower, had such dark and twisted thoughts? Though I'm no better. When I hear footsteps approaching, I startle. No time to leave. I quickly dive under the desk, pulling the chair close to hide myself. As the sound of entering the passcode rings out and the door opens, I hold my breath tensely. Through the chair gaps, I see long white legs wrapped in black stockings. She surveys the basement, then steps this way. "Don't come here." My heart racing, she stops at the desk and picks up her plan book to flip through it. I clench my teeth. "Don't pull the chair, don't sit down." Her delicate hand rests on the chair back. My heart nearly stops. Just then, her phone rings. She withdraws her hand, takes out her phone, and leaves. The door closes, and the crisp sound of high heels on the floor fades away. My heart returns to my chest as I relax, breathing heavily. My phone screen lights up, a message from Victoria asking where I am. I instantly reply I'm at an internet cafe with friends. After a few seconds, she responds she'll come find me. I reply I won't be home tonight. I regret it immediately. I should have given her an address to lead her away, then said I'd gone home. Now with her staying home, how can I get out of the basement? As I fret, a message comes from my buddy Charlie. Sophie's back in the country. There's a welcome party tonight. Want to come? Before I can hesitate, a second message arrives. My high school crush, his junior, turns out to be Sophie's cousin. Holy shit, they came back together. My pupils shake. Victoria's goddess is actually my beloved's cousin. I silently marvel. These two goddesses are synonymous with kindness and beauty, while Victoria and I are both dark and twisted. Birds of a feather really do flock together. I listen carefully and hear the villa's door close. Victoria has left, surely for her goddess's welcome party. I excitedly crawl out from under the desk. So that's it. I understand now. The message she sent me just now was to confirm my location so she could meet her Prince Charming tonight. When she sees me at the welcome dinner later, she'll be in for a shock. I pushed open the basement door, thinking about what to wear while I walked out. The house was empty, so I grabbed a beer from the fridge. As I was about to head upstairs, I noticed a shadow on the sofa. I took a few steps back and met a pair of cold, beautiful eyes. I was speechless. Victoria was lounging lazily, her long legs crossed, red high heels dangling slightly to reveal her slender ankles. Black, sheer stockings clung tightly to her legs, like a meticulously woven net that could ensnare anyone. Her skirt draped just right, giving an impression of careless allure without seeming intentional. The black, low-cut, cinched waist dress accentuated her tiny waist and hinted at her curves like an enticing invitation from an abyss. She looked up at me, her voice icy cold as she asked, "Going to the internet cafe?" I rubbed my forehead, swaying as if I couldn't stand straight, and weakly replied, "I think I have a fever. I'm feeling a bit out of it. Tomorrow, I'll go to the internet cafe tomorrow." Victoria stood up, her eyes piercing through me, making me break out in a cold sweat. Luckily, she didn't press further. She walked past me and calmly said, "I have something to do tonight," without another word of explanation. It wasn't until I heard the door close that I turned back. She was really gone this time. I observed the first floor. There was a bathroom next to the hidden door leading to the basement. From her spot on the sofa, she wouldn't have been able to tell if I had come from the bathroom or the basement. I changed into a tailored suit and headed to the location Charlie had sent me. He was already there and had sent me some photos of Rosemary. She was still as sweet and charming as ever, with dimples appearing when she smiled. Charlie texted, "She hasn't changed a bit, maybe just a bit fuller than in high school." I asked, "Has her personality changed?" He responded, "Nope, still loves to laugh. She studied abroad for 5 years and hasn't changed a bit. Don't you think that's strange?" I replied, "What's strange about that?" Charlie said her voice was already pretty high-pitched in high school, and she was quite naive. After all these years, she's still the same. It seems fake to me. Do you believe she's really that innocent, or do you believe I'm the Emperor of China? I paused and asked, "Are you saying Rosemary is a schemer?" Anyone could be pretending, but not my sweet junior. As for her cousin Sophie, even though she looks just as innocent, in high school I was always punished to stand outside in the cold. One winter, Sophie passed by and gave me a hot can of red bean milk. It warmed my heart and stomach, but less than 20 minutes later I had a terrible stomachache. Another time, I missed out on the last egg pancake. She came over with a gentle smile and said, "Junior, I'm not hungry, you can have mine." I was so touched, but half an hour later I passed out from food poisoning. I don't know if it was intentional or not, but since then I've avoided Sophie. Looking back, she and Victoria were probably already in love, and my presence between them must have annoyed her. No matter, I'll get back at her through her cousin. With these malicious thoughts, I pushed open the door to the private room, just a crack, to eavesdrop on their conversation. To my surprise, it was quiet inside, not the noisy atmosphere I had expected. It was dark until I heard two women's voices. One said, "Sis, I brought the medicine." The other replied, "Good." It was Sophie and Rosemary. Could Sophie be planning to drug Victoria? I thought for a second whether to warn Victoria, but decided against it. Let them fight it out. Rosemary hesitated and asked, "Are you coming with me tonight?" Sophie replied, "You go back on your own." Rosemary answered, "Got it." It seemed like Victoria wouldn't be going home tonight. Sophie continued, "Then it's time to discuss my divorce with Victoria. She can imprison hers and I'll imprison mine." Suddenly Rosemary objected, "Sis, what you're doing isn't right." As expected of my sweet junior, she even tried to advise her cousin. But Sophie was unmoved, replying lightly, "What nonsense are you talking about?" Just then a waiter passed by with a trolley, and I quickly closed the gap and turned away, missing Sophie's next words. "Cousin, you know more about these things than I do. Stop pretending." I moved to the hallway and saw Charlie's latest message. He wrote, "I was wondering why you hadn't arrived yet. Turns out I gave you the wrong room number. It's next door. Hurry up." I took a deep breath and entered the correct private room. It was brightly lit and filled with laughter from my old high school friends. Victoria lifted the curtain and glanced at me as if she didn't recognize me. I smirked as my buddy noticed the situation. "No, it's not right," I called out cheerfully. "Sincere, there's an empty seat over here. Come sit here." I walked over, and just then the door opened again. Sophie and Rosemary walked in one after another. Sophie spoke softly. I added a few more dishes. Everyone laughed, saying it was a bother for Senior. They returned to their seats, and I realized that the seat left for Rosemary was right next to mine. Sophie sat next to Victoria, smiling warmly. "Long time no see, Tori," she called out so affectionately. I forced a smile. Indeed, long time no see. As the saying goes, the white moonlight should be pure and flawless, but now I see clearly that Sophie is not. She has a black heart. If you ask me what in this world is truly pure and flawless, I slowly turned my gaze to Rosemary. She glanced at me, smiling with her lips curved. Her voice was clear and pleasant as she said, "Senior." I nodded repeatedly, laughing foolishly. "Junior, Junior." Her beautiful smile warmed my cold heart. Sophie rummaged through her bag and took out a box of chocolates. She walked over to me, looking innocent, as she handed it to me. She came with a faint scent of perfume. I was stunned for a moment and waved my hand and said, "No, thank you. I appreciate the gesture." From high school, I had developed the habit of not eating anything Sophie gave. But Sophie insisted. She said, "This is specially made for you." Not wanting to offend her in front of Rosemary, I took it. Sophie continued, "Try it. If you like it, I'll have more flown in for you." With so many people around, Sophie wouldn't really harm me, right? I sighed lightly, unwrapped a piece, and put it in my mouth. I replied, "Not bad, pretty good." I forced a stiff smile as the chocolate melted on my tongue. I swallowed. 10 seconds later, my face turned pale and I clutched my stomach. Charlie saw this and immediately came over, worried. "Sincere, what's wrong?" I gritted my teeth in pain, weakly saying, "Stomach pain. Take me to the hospital." Sophie's eyes filled with tears of disbelief. She said, I'm sorry. Are you allergic to some ingredient in the chocolate?" I didn't know. Charlie sighed. "I can't, Sincere. I had a few drinks." My teeth were about to break from clenching so hard. My stomach hurt, and my heart ached with anger. Sophie supported me from the other side, her voice panicked. "It won't be serious, right? It's all my fault. I didn't drink. Let me take Junior to the hospital. Where are your car keys?" Victoria finally spoke. "No need, I didn't drink either. I'll take him." I was speechless. Even when her husband was sick, she still thought it couldn't trouble her goddess, the white moonlight. Just then, Junior suddenly bit her lip and asked, "Are you going to accompany him to the hospital?" She was asking Sophie, her tone not quite right. Of course, if Sophie went with me to the hospital, what about her and Victoria? Was she planning to take the opportunity to stab me on the way? Thinking this, I panicked and quickly said, No need. Tonight is Senior's main event. Leaving is not good. How about Junior goes with me? Killing 2 birds with 1 stone, hee. Thinking this, my stomach seemed to hurt less. After I spoke, a flash of realization hit me. Rosemary is her cousin. Although the cousin is beautiful and kind-hearted, who knows if she might threaten her cousin? So I immediately added, "It's better if Victoria takes me to the hospital. We can gather again next time." In reality, at home, I always called Victoria that one. Victoria's expression froze for a moment. Then she supported my shoulder and walked me out step by step. I said goodbye to the others, paying attention to the expressions of the siblings. Sophie's smile had disappeared. She tucked her hair behind her ear and only managed a slight smile when our eyes met. Rosemary lowered her eyes, pouting with an unclear expression. Once in the car, I realized my stomach no longer hurt. I said lifelessly, let's go home. Victoria rolled her eyes, her tone cold. To the hospital. I replied, no need. Victoria pursed her lips in silence but still headed towards the hospital. Did she really think her goddess, the white moonlight, would poison me? It was past rush hour, so there weren't many cars on the road. Neon lights flickered, reflecting on her delicate features, her clear eyes, high nose, and long lashes casting a fan-shaped shadow on her eyelids. Like a painting. I sighed, and the words I'd buried deep inside came out without hindrance. I asked, when do you plan to get a divorce? The car screeched to a halt. I was speechless. If I hadn't been wearing a seatbelt, I would have been thrown out. I rubbed my forehead and said, no, can you not get so agitated? I turned my head to look at her, only to see Victoria's thin lips tightly pressed, not as relieved as I had imagined. There was even a hint of melancholy between her brows. Could it be that because I brought up the divorce first, she felt embarrassed? But if we don't divorce, that pile of stuff in the basement will have no place to go. After a checkup at the hospital, there was nothing wrong, but Victoria remained silent the whole way. Just as I hesitated to ask her further, Rosemary added me on social media. I accepted immediately. She texted, not good. How are you feeling now? Is my sister bothering you? Junior texted me. Don't worry, I'm fine, I replied quickly. If it's convenient for you, we'll come visit you tomorrow. We've bought some supplements for you. Sure, I responded efficiently, but I sighed inwardly. It seemed her cousin was not willing to give up. They were even coming to my house. I frowned, thinking about the secrets in the basement. Would they discover them? On the way home, my expression grew more serious. When I got home, I glanced at the basement several times. Victoria seemed not to notice and said coldly, I don't agree to the divorce. I was taken aback and looked at her for a long time. She raised her eyes to me, a hint of grievance in her voice. Do you have a reason to insist on divorce? I opened my mouth, but she continued, is it because my cooking doesn't suit your taste? No, it suits me well, I replied. Do I annoy you? No, not at all. I've always been satisfied with Victoria. Not only is she beautiful, but she also cooks very well and is always considerate, I thought to myself. In reality, the only thing that wasn't perfect was that we had never slept together. But I couldn't possibly tell her to change her sexual orientation. Moreover, could that even be changed? She had her own white moonlight, and I had mine. Not sleeping together was the right thing. Then what's your reason for divorce? Victoria's voice was slightly raised. I rubbed my temples and said, never mind, let's not divorce. I thought to myself, your goddess, your white moonlight, will be visiting tomorrow. Let's see who can't sit still first. The next morning, Victoria went out to get her nails done, but I made sure to tell her to be back before noon. Soon after, Sophie and Rose arrived. Senior Sophie greeted me with a warm smile, but surprisingly didn't ask about Victoria. Instead, she showed concern for me. By the way, the chocolate should still be good, right? Next time, I'll bring you some more to try. Don't just swallow it down. I was speechless and gave her a blank look. She giggled, seemingly pleased to have successfully teased me. I was annoyed. What was her problem? Suddenly, Sophie pointed meaningfully at a door. I followed her gaze and held my breath. She was pointing at the door to the basement. That door looks quite secure. Is it a study? She asked with curiosity. I stammered, struggling to find words. Well, you see, it's... Rose seemed to notice my difficulty and smoothly changed the topic. Sis, why are you so curious? Every house has one. I was speechless again. If they knew about the evil basement, they wouldn't say every house has one. Sophie persisted, but the design is different. Junior, can we go in and have a look? I gritted my teeth. No, Victoria doesn't like anyone going in there. All right. Sophie dragged out the word regretfully. Rose, unlike her sister, was easier to handle. She rested her chin in her hands, smiling sweetly at me. I tried to fend off Sophie's attacks, admired Rose's beauty, and anxiously waited for Victoria to return. Around 10:30 a.m., Victoria finally came back. I wasn't sure if it was just my imagination, but her expression darkened when she saw the two guests. Oddly, she didn't greet them, and they also remained silent. Victoria snorted coldly and walked straight into the bedroom without a glance at them. I quickly followed her in, closed the door, and asked, "What's with your reaction? Why did you stop talking?" My heart skipped a beat when I saw what was in her hand. Trembling, I asked, "What are you holding?" Victoria was flipping through my notebook, the one where I had made changes to her evil plan. She was engrossed, not sparing me a glance. The room was silent. The air seemed to have stopped. I forced a smile. Before I could explain, she pointed to one of my annotations. "Brother, your modification is quite good. We can test it on you first." She smiled faintly, her eyes dangerous. My eyes widened, and I instinctively took a step back, shaking my head frantically. "I didn't mean to peek at your plan, really." She stepped closer, wrapped her arms around my waist, and looked up at me with seductive eyes. I quickly said, "Think it over." She put a finger to my lips. "You've already changed it, so you have to be responsible, brother. Aren't you curious to see how well your modifications work?" Temptation and danger surrounded me. I realized I had never truly known her. Knock, knock, knock. The door was knocked, and Rose's concerned voice came through. "Is everything all right?" Like a fish out of water, I seized the opportunity to push Victoria away. Clearing my throat, I said, "Junior, I'm here. I'll be right out." I opened the door to meet Rose's sweet smile. "Your clothes are a mess," she said. I froze. Victoria adjusted my collar from the side. Rose's gaze shifted from me to Victoria, her smile never wavering. Victoria said, "Senior, you surprised me." Her thin lips parted slightly as she continued, "He's your senior, so you should call me sister-in-law." Rose glanced at me, a small smile tugging at her lips, but she remained silent. Noticing the awkward atmosphere, Sophie chimed in with a smile. "Since everyone is free today, why don't we go out for a walk later?" Being a smart person, I immediately understood the underlying message behind Victoria and Sophie's words. On the surface, Victoria seemed to be suggesting that Rose should call her sister-in-law because of me, the senior. But in reality, she was hinting that Rose's sister, Sophie, was romantically interested in her. Sophie's suggestion to go out wasn't meant for me. She wanted some alone time with Victoria. She would definitely suggest that Rose take me away, so they could have their private time. I couldn't help but smile. I had already placed the divorce papers on Victoria's bedside table. By the end of today, we would both be, I was absolutely defeated by them. I thought she should have a magical duel with Victoria instead of both of them coming to attack me. I fled in a panic, hailing a cab back home alone. The more I thought about it, the more absurd it seemed. Both Victoria and Sophie were acting strange. I tossed and turned in bed, trying to calm my thoughts. There was still one normal person left, though. I contacted Rosemary. Rosemary lived in a spacious apartment with minimalist decor, giving it an almost unfinished feel. I was somewhat surprised as I walked in. For someone as gentle and soft as her, I expected at least some pink decorations or fluffy toys. It felt too empty, not even a single fuzzy toy. Considering her personality, it would be normal for her to have some cats or dogs. "Junior, you don't have to be so reserved. Make yourself at home," Rosemary said softly. I turned around to see her closing the door. She was petite and delicate, with a cute face and dimples on her cheeks. She wore a white puff-sleeve dress, and under the gray backdrop she exuded an indescribable aura. Pushing aside the strange feeling in my heart, I started exploring her place. All the rooms were open for ventilation except for the innermost one, which was locked. I felt a sense of déjà vu, but shrugged it off as Rosemary seemed quite normal. She went to the kitchen to pour me a glass of water and handed it to me. Sitting on the sofa, holding the glass, I took a deep breath and said, "Junior, what do you think about your cousin?" I carefully chose my words. Rosemary looked up at me. I struggled to find the right way to phrase it. How could I tell her I thought her cousin was even more off than I was? After a long pause, I finally said, "Junior, why do you think there are people who are so obsessive?" Rosemary blinked. I pinched the bridge of my nose and said, "I really can't understand your cousin." Rosemary thought for a moment, then in a clear voice she said, "Maybe it's because she likes you too much." My mouth fell open in shock. My theory on obsessions from yesterday must have really gotten to her. She looked at me seriously and analyzed, "You see, my cousin just likes Victoria too much. But if Victoria agrees, then she also has a big problem. Senior, you should consider getting a divorce." I was speechless. I numbly replied, "But what if your cousin isn't interested in girls and the person she's obsessed with is me?" Rosemary looked confused. I took a sip of water and hesitantly said, "Your cousin said that although she hates me, she loves to see me suffer. She is like that since high school." Rosemary's expression froze for a moment. I ground my teeth and said, "She told me that if I ever got divorced, I should go beg her. She would reluctantly take me in, lock me up, and watch me suffer every day. Isn't that just crazy? If she hates me, why would she want to lock me up?" I looked at Rosemary, clenching my teeth, and said, "For example, if I wanted to lock you up, it would be because I like you. She hates me. So why would she want to lock me up?" I thought to myself, Sophie and Victoria should just have a magical duel. Rosemary's eyes narrowed slightly as she caught the key point in my words. She asked, "You want to lock me up?" I awkwardly scratched my head and said, "Just an example. I mean, hypothetically." "Oh," she replied as if she hadn't heard me. "I also want to lock you up." I was speechless. "Don't joke around, Junior," I said. Rosemary's eyes sparkled with a faint smile. I abruptly stood up and said, "Sorry to bother you, I have something to do." In my haste, I tripped over the carpet and fell on my butt. I was speechless. Rosemary sighed softly, crouching down to help me up. I pushed her away and sat back on the sofa. She didn't stand up, remaining in a crouched position, watching me. I instinctively felt a sense of danger. "Senior," she said softly, "if I begged you, would you let me go?" I was stunned for a moment, then imagined the scenario. If I locked up Rosemary and she begged me to let her go, I would probably say yes. She immediately responded, "If it were me, I wouldn't." She didn't hesitate, and her eyes still held a trace of a smile. Damn, I was speechless. She looked up again and said, "Senior, aren't you curious about what's in that locked room?" As tension filled the air, my phone chimed with a message. Rosemary glanced at the screen. It was from Sophie. "You're at Rosemary's place. Do you know why she was attacked by those thugs when you saved her?" Why was Sophie suddenly bringing this up? That incident was how Rosemary and I first met. My thoughts wandered. Wasn't it because they were bullying her? Rosemary casually said, "I couldn't stand them, so I put laxatives in their drinks." Damn, I was speechless. Everything goes back to high school. During high school, I was in the same class as Victoria. We were desk mates. Everyone called her an unattainable flower and said I was no good, telling her to stay away from me. I couldn't stand that, so I would often mess with her. Until one time during an 800-meter run, I overextended myself and couldn't move. Victoria paused her steps, noticing something was wrong with me. She supported me to the infirmary, and thus I was able to keep my important belongings. I was deeply moved and said, "Victoria, you're so kind. I won't bother you in the future." Victoria just snorted and said, "Suit yourself." After that, I occasionally brought her breakfast or fetched some water to express my gratitude. There was a girl in the neighboring class, beautiful and excellent in her studies, who often wandered into our class after every break. I wondered which boy she had a crush on but didn't dare to confess to. However, Victoria told me she's a lesbian and comes to find me. I was extremely speechless at that moment, thinking it was such a pity. Sophie still came to our class every day. I occasionally chatted with her, and my high school life passed by blandly. Once, when I was heading home, I passed an alley near the school and heard yelling and the sounds of kicking. I called the police and then grabbed what I imagined was completely different. I tossed and turned in bed until I received an email from the private detective I had hired. After carefully reading through the information and data, I collapsed back onto the bed, feeling utterly hopeless. After Sophie's parents divorced, no one wanted to take care of her, so she was sent to Rosemary's parents. However, her parents were both unfaithful and fought every time they saw each other. As a result, Sophie and Rose grew up with nothing but money and were often mocked by their peers for being parentless. In truth, how could children in such an environment be kind and innocent? The drama was overwhelming. It turned out that the person Victoria, the sickly and manipulative one, wanted to confine was me. Sophie called me on a video chat and I instinctively answered. She was wearing a red dress and holding a cigarette between her fingers. Neither of us spoke until she finished her cigarette. Her almond-shaped eyes narrowed, shedding the facade of innocence. She said, "I was indeed a bad sister before. Come out, and I'll give you some shares of the company." I was speechless. She had gone mad. Seeing that I didn't respond, she scanned my background and asked, "Have you been locked up by Victoria?" I replied, "Not yet." She said, "Stay away from her and Rose." I chuckled. "The person I should stay away from the most is you." She was silent for a while, then smiled gently just like before and said, "Brother, I won't do those bad things anymore, okay? Let me make it up to you, can I?" I looked at her for a long time and finally said, "If you don't like smiling like that, you don't have to force yourself. You look good even when you don't smile." She was stunned. After she hung up, Rose messaged me. She said, "Junior, I miss you." I replied, "Not divorced yet. Don't disturb me." I thought to myself, I can lock you up, but if you try to lock me up, that's your fault. I was also torn about Victoria. In Victoria's confinement plan, the name was never mentioned. Plus, when we got married, we had a verbal agreement to a marriage of convenience, not interfering with each other's lives. So I subjectively thought she must be planning to imprison someone else. If not for the recent events spiraling out of my control, I wouldn't have asked Victoria proactively, and I wouldn't have known the truth. No one spoke up except me. At that moment, I heard a noise downstairs. Simultaneously, I received a message from Rose. She said, "Junior, I'm here to rescue you now." I immediately jumped out of bed and looked down from the window. There were 3 figures, not one less. Victoria seemed to sense something and looked up, meeting my eyes at the window. I quickly ducked back. While they were outside, probably arguing, I quietly tiptoed downstairs, dragging a large garbage bag into the basement. Bit by bit, I